The man who answered the door was wearing my favorite blue sweater. He smiled, a friendly, easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, I could see the living room of my own house. My painting was still on the wall, the one I bought on our honeymoon. My wife, Eleanor, was on the couch, laughing at something on TV. They looked so happy, so comfortable, living in the middle of my stolen life. The man looked at my scarred face and my crooked leg, his smile fading into pity. "Can I help you?" he asked. He had no idea he was talking to a dead man. My name is Caleb Vance, or at least it was. I was 58 years old, an architect who spent 30 years building things that were meant to last. I thought my marriage to Eleanor was one of them. We had built a life together, brick by brick. We planned our retirement, imagining quiet mornings and long walks. We were supposed to grow old in that house, the one she now shared with him. I trusted her with my whole world, my entire heart. I never imagined that the foundation of our life was built on a lie, and that it was all about to come crashing down. It all started with our 30th anniversary trip to the Cascade Mountains in Washington. It was Eleanor's idea, a romantic getaway to celebrate us. She said she wanted to feel close to nature, to stand on top of the world together. She even invited a friend, a man named Marcus, to be our guide. He was younger, stronger, and full of charming stories. I thought he was just a nice guy she'd met at her book club. Looking back, I should have seen the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? The hike was beautiful. The air was crisp and clean, and the sun shone through the tall pine trees. Marcus led the way, pointing out different birds and plants. Eleanor walked between us, laughing at his jokes. I started to feel like a third wheel on my own anniversary trip. When we reached the highest point, a breathtaking cliff overlooking a deep valley, Marcus suggested we take a picture. He told me to stand near the edge to get the perfect shot. The view was incredible, stretching for miles. I remember turning to Eleanor, smiling, ready to put my arm around her for the picture. That's when I felt the hands on my back. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a hard, deliberate shove. For a split second, my world stopped. I saw Eleanor's face, not in shock or horror, but with a cold, empty look I had never seen before. Then I was falling. The sky and the rocks spun together in a blur of green and gray. There was no time to scream. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Eleanor turning her back and walking away with Marcus. She didn't even look down. She just left me to die. But I didn't die. A group of hikers found me days later, broken and barely breathing at the bottom of a ravine. My body was a mess of shattered bones and deep cuts, but the fire inside me was burning hotter than ever. I spent months in a hospital in a small town, a nameless man with a rebuilt face. Every painful surgery, every day of learning to walk again, was fueled by one single thought: them. I pictured them living in my house, sleeping in my bed, spending my money. And I promised myself I would not rest until I took it all back. 6 months after my death, I was finally released. I was a different person. My face was a road map of scars. My voice was a rough whisper from the damage to my throat, and I walked with a permanent, painful limp. I found my own obituary online. Caleb Vance, beloved husband, lost in a tragic hiking accident. Eleanor had collected my life insurance policy, my pension, everything I had worked my entire life for. They thought I was gone forever. They had no idea that the ghost of the man they killed was coming back to haunt them. And so here I am, standing on my own porch, a stranger to my own wife. I'm from a community outreach program. I rasped, my voice unrecognizable. Just doing a quick survey in the neighborhood. Eleanor glanced over from the couch, annoyed by the interruption. She looked right at my scarred face, right into my eyes, and saw nothing. Not a flicker of recognition. 30 years of marriage, and she looked at me like I was a piece of trash on her doorstep. The pain of that single look was sharper than any broken bone. From my car parked down the street, I watched them through the window. I saw Marcus put his arm around Eleanor and kiss her. They were living the life they stole from me. But their happy little story was about to end. Rage is a powerful fuel, but revenge, Revenge is a blueprint. And as an architect, I know how to build things perfectly. They thought they had buried their mistake at the bottom of a cliff, but they only planted a seed. And what's about to grow will tear their world apart from the very foundation. I picked up my phone and made a call. A woman's voice answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. I watched as the lights in my old bedroom turned on, casting a warm glow. My voice was low and steady, a promise of the storm to come. "It's time," I said. "We start with the money. What do you think he's going to do first? Let us know in the comments, and also tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. This is just the beginning of Caleb's journey. If you want to see how a dead man gets his revenge, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss Chapter 2. You won't believe what happens next." The voice on the other end of the phone belonged to Sarah. She was the nurse who had cared for me in that small-town hospital, the one who saw past my broken body and scarred face. While the doctors fixed my bones, she helped fix my will to live. She listened to my whispered, painful story, and she believed me. Sarah was the one who helped me vanish from the system when I was discharged, creating a new identity for a man who wasn't supposed to exist. She was my only ally, the only person in the world who knew Caleb Vance was still alive. "They're comfortable, Sarah," I said into the phone, my voice low. "They think they got away with it." Sarah's reply was calm and steady, like it always was. "Comfortable people are the easiest to knock over," she said. "They don't expect the ground to shake." Our plan wasn't about running to the police. Who would believe a ghost? It was about taking back my life piece by piece, starting with the foundation it was built on, the money. We were going to make the insurance company and the pension fund believe that a massive fraud had been committed. I closed my eyes and a memory hit me, sharp and clear. It was years ago, on a rainy Sunday. I was explaining my pension plan to Eleanor, showing her the paperwork. "This is it, Ellie," I'd said proudly. 30 years of hard work. This is our forever fund. It means we'll never have to worry." She had smiled and traced the numbers with her finger. "You've taken such good care of us, Caleb," she'd whispered. Now, the memory felt like a lie. I suddenly remembered a strange question she asked that day. "So if anything happened to you, it all comes to me directly?" I thought it was an innocent question then. Back in the present, Sarah's voice cut through the painful memory. "I found something on Marcus," she said. "He's not just a charming hiking guide. He's a financial advisor, and he's drowning in debt. He declared bankruptcy 2 years ago." Suddenly, everything made a horrible kind of sense. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a business transaction. Eleanor had the key to a fortune, my fortune, and Marcus knew exactly how to turn that key. My wife didn't just fall in love with another man. She sold my life to the highest bidder. What do you think is worse, a betrayal of the heart or a betrayal for money? Our first move had to be quiet, like a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples would do the work for us. From a computer at a public library, I created an anonymous email account. I wrote a single short message to the head of the fraud investigation unit at North Star Life Insurance. The email said, "Regarding policy, #73450, B for Caleb Vance. Ask his wife about the secret savings account he opened in Oak Haven, the one he called his rainy day fund." Only Eleanor and I knew about that account. It was a small detail, but it was a seed of doubt. Living as a ghost is a hollow existence. I stayed in a tiny bare apartment across town, a place where the walls were thin and the sirens never stopped. Every dollar I spent felt strange because it wasn't mine. It came from Sarah's savings, a loan from a woman who barely knew me but trusted me completely. Some nights, the rage kept me awake. But most nights, it was the sadness. I missed my home. I missed my name. I missed the man I used to be, the man who believed in things like forever. A few days later, Sarah called. Her voice was tense. "Caleb," they opened it. My heart started to beat faster. "The email was opened less than an hour after you sent it," she continued. "And it's been flagged and forwarded to a senior investigator named Maria Flores." The first ripple had begun. The bait was taken. But before I could feel any relief, Sarah added something else. There's more about Marcus. It's not just debt. He has a history of intimidating clients who file complaints against him. One man ended up in the hospital. Caleb, this man is dangerous. The news should have scared me. A part of me should have wanted to run, to disappear, and leave them to their stolen life. But it did the opposite. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Knowing Marcus was not just a greedy coward, but a violent predator made my mission even clearer. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about protecting anyone else who might get in his way. It was about justice. What would you do? If you knew your enemy was this dangerous, would it make you back down? Or would you push forward even harder? The next week was the longest of my life. The waiting was a special kind of torture. Every day, I parked my old car where I had a clear view of my house, watching them come and go. I saw them have groceries delivered. I saw them getting a new car. They were spending my life away. Then one afternoon it happened. A plain black car pulled into my driveway. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, holding a briefcase. She walked up to my front door and knocked. I saw Eleanor answer, her smile quickly fading as the woman held up a badge. I held my breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel. It was her, the investigator, Maria Flores. My plan was working. Eleanor let her inside, and the door closed. A surge of victory went through me, but it vanished in an instant. Another car was pulling up to the curb. It was Marcus. He got out of his car, saw the investigator's vehicle, and his face changed. The charming smile was gone. In its place was a look of pure, cold fury. He didn't look confused. He looked like an animal that just realized the hunter was closing in, and he was walking straight for the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched Marcus slam my front door shut. He was inside now, caged with Eleanor and the investigator. I was too far away to hear anything, but I could imagine it all. Marcus would switch on his oily charm, acting concerned and confused. Eleanor would play the part of the heartbroken widow, maybe even squeezing out a few fake tears. They would be a perfect team, covering for each other's lies. But Maria Flores was not an audience for their play. She was a hunter, and she was there because she smelled blood in the water. For the first time in 6 long months, a feeling of power washed over me. I was the ghost pulling the strings, the silent director of their nightmare. They thought they had all the control, that their wealth and comfort were secure. But they had built their new life on a grave, and I was the man crawling out of it. Every beat of silence from that house was a victory. Every second that the investigator stayed inside was another drop of poison seeping into their perfect world. They were being forced to relive the day they tried to kill me, but this time their story had to be perfect. My mind flashed back to the reason the investigator was there at all, the Oak Haven bank account. I remember the day I opened it. It was meant to be the ultimate surprise for our anniversary. I had been secretly saving for 2 years for a luxury cruise to Alaska, the one Eleanor had torn out of a magazine years ago, saying one day. Every extra dollar I earned went into that account. I imagined her face when I showed her the tickets. I remember the last deposit I made just a week before our trip. When I came home, she told me she'd spent the afternoon at a spa. I later found a receipt showing she'd been at a fancy cafe across town, the same cafe Marcus always posted pictures from. I was on the phone with Sarah, my voice a low whisper as I described the scene. "Stay calm, Caleb," she said. "Let the plan work." While I was playing spy, she had been busy. "I did some research on the investigator, Maria Flores," Sarah told me. "She has a nickname at her company, the Bulldog. Once she gets her teeth into a case, she does not let go. If there is a single lie in their story, she will find it." A surge of grim hope shot through me. We hadn't just gotten their attention. We had summoned their worst nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, the front door opened. Maria Flores walked out, her face giving nothing away. She stood on the porch for a moment, looking back at Eleanor and Marcus, who were framed in the doorway. They weren't holding hands. They weren't even standing close. They looked like two strangers who had just survived a car crash. There was a visible, angry space between them. Maria got into her car without another word and drove off. What did she find out? Did they break? Or did they just pass the first test? I watched as Marcus turned to Eleanor. I couldn't hear his words, but I could see the fury in the set of his jaw. He said something sharp, and Eleanor flinched before they both retreated back inside. That was it. That was the first crack. The fear was now in the house with them. My plan was never just about the money. It was about dismantling them, breaking the evil trust they had built on my bones. I wanted them to look at each other and see not a lover, but a co-conspirator who could send them to jail. Later that night, Sarah called me with incredible news. She had a friend who worked in the insurance company's administrative department, and she had taken a huge risk to get us information. "It's done, Caleb," Sarah said, her voice filled with excitement. "Flores put a temporary freeze on all payouts from your accounts. The life insurance, the pension, everything. They're cut off." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The flow of money was stopped. But then Sarah added the words that changed everything. "And that's not all. She just put in a formal request for the original, full police report from your accident." My mind raced. The original police report was thin. A grieving wife, a tragic fall, no witnesses. It was ruled an accident within 48 hours. The local sheriff was kind and overworked. He took Eleanor's story at face value. But Maria Flores wouldn't see a grieving widow. She would see a multi-million-dollar beneficiary. She would question why they didn't call for help sooner. She would question why Marcus, the guide, had no professional credentials. She would dig into every single detail the sheriff had glossed over. The sloppy story they told would not hold up under a real microscope. This was it. The machine was now moving on its own. I had started the fire, but now the wind was carrying it, and it was growing into an inferno I couldn't fully control. There was a terrifying beauty to it, watching the consequences unfold. But it also made me wonder, is revenge ever really about control? Or do you just let a monster loose and hope it only devours the people you hate? It's a question I think anyone who has ever been deeply wronged has to ask themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I drove back to my street, parking in the shadows. A light was on in the living room. I could see them both inside. They were fighting. Marcus was pacing the room like a caged tiger, shouting, his arms waving wildly. Eleanor was huddled on the couch, looking small and pale. The pressure was breaking them. He was a man drowning in debt who had just lost his golden goose. As I sat there, watching the life I built become a war zone, Marcus suddenly stopped. He turned and stared directly out the window, right at me. For a chilling second, I felt like his eyes pierced the darkness and saw me sitting there. My breath caught in my throat. For a long second, the world went silent. It felt like Marcus was staring right through the dark, right through the glass, and into my soul. My hands flew from the steering wheel, and I ducked down below the dashboard, my heart beating like a drum against my ribs. Was I caught? Was it all over? After a minute that felt like an hour, I slowly raised my head. Marcus was still at the window, but his eyes were scanning the empty street. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking for me. For a ghost. I started my car and drove away, my fear slowly turning into a cold, hard smile. The paranoia was working. I met Sarah at a small coffee shop the next morning. "The asset freeze is a big step," she explained, "but it's only temporary. The investigator, Maria, needs more than just a gut feeling. We need to give her something else, something that proves this wasn't just a random accident. We needed to tighten the screw, to increase the pressure until the cracks between Eleanor and Marcus shattered completely. We had to move from planting seeds of doubt to showing them that the ghost of their victim was actively haunting them. They needed to feel true fear. To truly scare Eleanor, I had to dig up a part of our past I had buried deep inside. I thought of our honeymoon in Florence, Italy. We were young, happy, and so in love. In a dusty little antique shop, I bought her a small, silver locket shaped like a heart. It was unique, one of a kind. A few years later, she came to me, crying that she had lost it. I saw how devastated she was. Months after that, I was fixing our bed frame and found it tangled in the fabric behind the headboard. I kept it safe, planning to give it back to her on our 30th anniversary. I still have it. The plan was simple and cruel. We would mail the locket to her. No note, no return address, just the locket in a small, plain box. A message from a dead man. Sarah, ever the careful planner, took care of the details. She created a trail that could never be traced, sending the package through a series of different post offices in different towns. My part was the emotional one. I held the silver heart in my scarred hand, the metal cool against my skin. It was a perfect symbol of our story, a beautiful thing that was lost, found, and was now being used to destroy everything. A few days later, I was back in my car, watching my house. I saw the mail carrier put the small package on the doorstep. I watched as Eleanor came out to get the mail, a frown on her face as she looked at the plain brown box. She took it inside. My mind replayed the moment over and over. Her opening the box, her seeing the locket she thought was gone forever, the confusion turning to shock, then to ice-cold terror. No one else on earth knew I had found that locket. To her, it would feel like I had reached out from the grave and dropped it in her hand. There's a dark side to revenge that no one talks about. It's not just about punishing your enemies. It's about destroying your own beautiful memories. Holding that locket, I didn't just feel anger. I felt a deep, profound sadness for the man who bought it, for the woman who first wore it, and for the love they once shared. To win this war, I had to burn down the cities of my own past. I had to take the things that once brought me joy and turn them into weapons. Revenge doesn't just poison your enemies, it poisons you, too. That night, my surveillance paid off in a chilling new way. I saw Marcus leave the house alone. He was angry, slamming the car door. I followed him, keeping a safe distance. He didn't go to a friend's house or a restaurant. He drove to a rundown bar in a bad part of town. I watched from across the street as he met with two men who looked like they broke bones for a living. Marcus was talking frantically, his hands chopping the air. I saw him slide a thick envelope across the table. He wasn't just getting scared, he was getting proactive. He was hiring thugs. I called Sarah immediately, my voice tight with alarm. He's hiring people, Sarah. Big, dangerous-looking men. The line was quiet for a moment. This changes things, Caleb, she said, her voice losing its usual calm. He's not just defending himself against an investigation anymore. He's actively hunting for whoever is doing this. He's hunting for you. You are no longer safe just watching from a distance. You are the target. The game had changed. The hunter was now being hunted, and the prey was a man who had nothing left to lose. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and determination. This was no longer a quiet game of chess. Marcus had just flipped the board over and pulled out a knife. Was this worth it? Was I willing to risk my own life, the second chance I was so miraculously given, just to see them punished? I thought about the fall, about Eleanor's cold eyes, and the answer was a resounding yes. When does the fight for justice become a suicide mission? I wonder, what would you do if you were in my shoes? The next day, something happened that told me the locket had hit its mark. I saw Eleanor leave the house. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. She drove straight to the Oak Haven Bank, the bank where I had the secret savings account. She was only inside for a few minutes. When she came out, she was clutching a single piece of paper, a printout of the account history. She stared at it, her face a mask of pure terror. She looked up and down the street, her eyes wide, as if she was expecting my ghost to be standing right there on the sidewalk. I watched as Eleanor scrambled out of her car and ran into the house, clutching that piece of paper like it was a venomous snake. She was terrified, and I knew exactly why. The night before, I'd had Sarah make a small, anonymous deposit into the Oak Haven savings account. The amount was $34.50. The exact price of the antique silver locket I'd bought her in Florence all those years ago. It was a transaction that was completely impossible. It was a whisper from my grave, and Eleanor had heard it loud and clear. From my car, I saw the explosion happen. Eleanor burst into the living room, waving the bank statement at Marcus. I couldn't hear the words, but her panic was obvious. His reaction was just as clear. He wasn't scared, he was angry. He snatched the paper from her, glanced at it, and then laughed. He likely thought it was a bank error, some computer glitch. To a man like Marcus, the world is made of things you can touch and things you can break. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in enemies, and his response was rage, not fear. Their fight brought back a memory I had long forgotten. I remembered finding a $500 cash withdrawal on our bank statement about a year before my accident. When I asked Eleanor about it, her eyes filled with tears. She said she had loaned the money to a friend from her book club whose family was struggling. I felt like a monster for even asking. I hugged her and told her our money was her money. Now I see the truth. There was no struggling friend. There was only Marcus. I hadn't been funding a friend in need. I had been funding my own betrayal. The fight inside my old house grew uglier. Marcus crumpled up the bank statement and threw it on the floor. He grabbed Eleanor by the arm, his face twisted in a snarl. I saw her try to pull away, and for the first time, she looked truly afraid of him. A strange and bitter satisfaction rose in my chest. This is what I wanted. I wanted them to turn on each other. But watching the woman I had loved for 30 years being treated like that, even by him, it left a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. The next day, Marcus wasn't just angry anymore. He was focused. The locket and the bank deposit had shown him this wasn't just an insurance investigation. Someone was playing a game with them. I watched as he and one of the thugs he'd hired got into a car. My blood ran cold as I watched them drive away, because I knew where they were going. They drove straight to the public library I had used. They walked inside, looking for the source of the anonymous email. Were my footprints so easy to follow? Was my ghost about to get caught? My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. My voice was a choked whisper. They're here. They're at the library. Sarah's voice was suddenly sharp, all business. Leave. Now. Go to the safe place we talked about. Ditch your phone. I will call you on a new one in exactly 1 hour. Do you understand, Caleb? Go now. The safe place was a cheap, anonymous motel on the far side of town. Suddenly, I wasn't the puppeteer anymore. I was back to being the one who was running for his life. The hunter was once again the hunted. I sat in that stale, lonely motel room, the patterned curtains doing a poor job of blocking out the afternoon sun. The feeling of power I had enjoyed was completely gone, replaced by the familiar taste of fear. An hour later, a cheap burner phone Sarah had given me buzzed on the nightstand. It was her. The library staff didn't tell them anything, she said, and I started to breathe again. But Caleb, that's not the problem. My stomach tightened. They put a tracker on your car, she said softly. They've been following you for days. The world tilted. A tracker. That's how they found the library. He wasn't a genius. I was an idiot. Those thugs he hired must have planted it on my car while it was parked near the house. For days, I thought I was a ghost, moving unseen through the city. But I wasn't. I was a beacon, leading them closer and closer to my hiding spots. I had led them through Sarah's neighborhood, right past her apartment building. The guilt was like a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. I had put the only person who cared about me in terrible danger. My whole plan, my entire quest for revenge, felt like it was crumbling. I had made a stupid amateur mistake, and now Marcus knew he wasn't being haunted by a ghost. He was being targeted by a man. A man he could find. A man he could hurt. It forces you to ask a hard question. When your righteous crusade puts innocent people in the line of fire, what do? Do you surrender to protect them? Or do you accept the cost and fight even harder, knowing they might get hurt? The burner phone rang again. It was Sarah. Her voice was different, harder. Listen to me, Caleb. They think they are hunting a man who is hiding. We need to make them believe they are hunting a ghost again. I have a new plan, but it's insane. It's incredibly dangerous, and you'll think I'm crazy. I was out of options, a cornered animal. I'll do anything, I whispered. Good, Sarah said, her voice dropping. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car, and you're going to drive it to the cliffs. The same cliffs where they tried to kill you. My mind reeled at Sarah's words. Go back to the cliffs? Sarah, are you insane? That's the place they tried to kill me. I could hear the panic in my own voice. Her reply, however, was perfectly calm, cutting through my fear with sharp logic. Yes, Caleb, that's the point. Right now, they are hunting for a man who is making their lives difficult. We need to make them believe they are being haunted by a ghost who they can't stop. The tracker on your car is their only lead. We aren't going to hide from it. We're going to use it to write the next chapter of our story. The plan she laid out was both terrifying and brilliant. I would drive my track car back to the exact spot where they pushed me. Sarah would follow from a safe distance in a clean, untraceable car. I would then rig my car to go over the cliff, making it look like an accident or a suicide. The man they were hunting would be gone, vanished at the same spot as Caleb Vance. It would erase my trail and send them spiraling into a new level of fear and confusion. They wouldn't know if their tormentor was dead or if it was a ghost who could disappear at will. The drive to the mountains was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. With every mile, the memories grew stronger, twisting in my gut. I remember the last time I made this drive, with Eleanor beside me, quiet and distant. Marcus was in the back, acting like a charming tour guide. I remembered him pointing at the sharp turns and steep drops, saying, "You really have to respect the mountain. One wrong move, one little slip, and it'll swallow you whole." At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic. Now I realized he wasn't talking about a slip. He was rehearsing his lines. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. The beautiful green pine trees that lined the road now looked like angry spikes. The clear blue sky felt like a cold, empty canvas. I was driving myself back to my own grave. A part of me screamed to turn the car around, to run and never look back. But the image of Eleanor's cold face as I fell, the thought of them living my life, was stronger than my fear. This journey wasn't just about a plan. It was about facing the worst moment of my life and proving that it didn't break me. I pulled into the deserted lookout point. It looked exactly the same. The same low stone wall, the same breathtaking and horrifying view. The wind whistled, a lonely sound that echoed the emptiness inside me. I got out of the car, my bad leg aching, and forced myself to walk to the edge. I looked down at the rocks below, the place where my body was shattered. I could almost feel it again, the terrifying weightlessness, the rush of air, the final brutal impact. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah's small car parked off a service road, half hidden by trees. It was time. I worked quickly, my adrenaline blocking out the pain and fear. I wedged the steering wheel hard to the left, aiming it at a gap in the stone wall that led to the abyss. I took a heavy rock I'd brought with me and jammed it onto the gas pedal, the engine revving in protest. All that was left was to put the car in drive and release the handbrake. Sarah sent me a text message that made my blood run cold. They just passed the 5-mile marker. They're coming fast. Go, Caleb. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my ears. I reached into the car and put the gear stick in drive. The car strained against the brake, ready to leap forward. As a final touch, I took off my old, worn jacket, the same one from that day, and tossed it onto the driver's seat. A little prop for their ghost story. I reached down and yanked the handbrake release. The car shot forward. I tried to scramble back, but my bad leg buckled underneath me. I fell hard onto the sharp gravel, scraping my hands and face. Pain shot through my leg, but I ignored it. I crawled backward, watching as my car, the last physical piece of my old life, raced toward the edge. It smashed through the low stone wall, as if it were made of paper. For a single beautiful second, the car was suspended in the air, framed against the sky. Then it tipped forward and plunged down, disappearing into the vast emptiness. A few seconds later, a terrible sound of twisting, screaming metal echoed up from the canyon below. It was over. I lay on the ground, gasping for air, the smell of dust and gasoline in my nose. I had done it. I had died a second time. A strange feeling washed over me, not victory, but a hollow emptiness. I was erasing myself, piece by piece, to get my revenge. What would be left of me at the end? Is it possible to truly get your life back if you have to burn every memory, every part of it, to fuel the fire? Caleb, we have to go now. Sarah was there, pulling me to my feet. I leaned on her as we hurried toward her car. We were almost at the tree line when we heard the screech of tires. We ducked behind a large cluster of bushes just as Marcus's SUV skidded to a stop. He and his two thugs jumped out. They ran to the broken wall, staring down in disbelief at the wreck below. Marcus's face was a storm of confusion and anger. Then, one of his men pointed at the ground. He walked over to the spot where I had fallen. He bent down and picked something up. It was my burner phone, which must have fallen from my pocket. From our hiding spot in the bushes, my world crumbled for the second time. I watched the thug hand my burner phone to Marcus. The plan was in ruins. A phone is not a ghost story. A phone is a piece of evidence. It is a trail of breadcrumbs that can be followed. Marcus stared at the small black rectangle in his hand, and the look of confused rage on his face slowly melted away. It was replaced by a cold, sharp smile. He now knew, with absolute certainty, that his tormentor was a real living man. And that man was scared, clumsy, and on the run. Sarah pulled me away from the edge, and we moved like shadows through the trees to her car. The drive down the mountain was silent, but the air in the car was thick with failure and fear. A few minutes ago, we were in control. Now we were prey. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I whispered, the words feeling heavy and useless in my mouth. "It's my fault. I got careless." She didn't answer. She just gripped the steering wheel tighter, her eyes on the road. For the first time since I'd met her, I could see the fine cracks in her calm exterior. She was scared, too. My crushing guilt dragged a memory to the surface. It was from years ago, when I had made a major mistake on a blueprint for a new office building. The error cost my company thousands of dollars and weeks of delays. I came home that night feeling like a complete failure. Eleanor met me at the door. She didn't yell or blame me. She just held me and said, "Don't worry, Caleb. We're a team. We will face this together, and we will fix it." The memory was like swallowing glass. The woman who promised to be my teammate in failure was the architect of my destruction. And now my carelessness had endangered Sarah, the only true teammate I had left. We got back to the stale, suffocating air of the motel room. The gravity of my mistake crashed down on us. "The phone," Sarah said, her voice finally breaking the silence. "What was on it?" My mind went blank, then raced. "Nothing. It's clean. No contacts, no texts, nothing personal." We both stared at each other as the same horrifying realization dawned on us at the same time. The call log. There was only one number ever called from that phone, over and over again. The number to the burner phone Sarah was holding in her own hand. The crosshairs of danger had now moved from me directly onto Sarah. Marcus wasn't a fool. He now had a direct link to the person helping me. He would find someone who could trace that number. Maybe it would take him a day, maybe a week, but the trail would eventually lead him to her. Her apartment, her job at the hospital. Her entire life was now a target. The ghost she had been helping had led the hunters right to her doorstep. How long did we have before they came for her? Sarah walked over to the small table, her movements calm and deliberate. "I have to disappear," she said, as if she were deciding what to have for dinner. "I can't go home. I can't go to work. It's over." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had survived the fall from the cliff, but this felt worse. My quest for justice had cost an innocent, kind woman her entire life. She was giving it all up for a fight that wasn't even hers. I had dragged her into the darkness with me. She took her phone, snapped it in half, and pulled out the small SIM card, cutting it into tiny pieces. "They can't trace a ghost, Caleb," she said, her voice hard now. "Our old plan is dead. Playing mind games is over. We need a new one. We need something that finishes this for good." As she spoke, an image flashed in my mind. The thug at the cliff. The man who picked up the phone. He had a tattoo on his wrist. I only saw it for a second, but it was clear. A snake coiled into a circle, with a single bright red eye. I'd seen it before. My brain felt like an old, dusty attic, but I began to search. A tattoo like that, it was unique. I wouldn't forget it. Where did I know it from? A face swam into my memory. A man I hadn't thought about in years. It was at a company picnic about 5 years ago. My firm had hired a new landscaping company. The owner was a hard-looking man who gave everyone the creeps. He had that exact tattoo on his wrist. His name was Silas. Silas Blackwood. This was it. This was a real lead. Marcus hadn't hired some random thug from a bar. He had hired someone with a name, a history, a business. A thread that we could pull. For the first time since we fled the cliffs, I felt a spark of hope ignite in the darkness. When you've been pushed off a cliff, you learn to look for any handhold you can find. Have you ever had a moment like that? Where a small, forgotten detail from your past suddenly becomes the key to your future. Sarah, I said, my voice hoarse with excitement. The thug who found the phone. I know him. I think I know his name. At that exact moment, a news report on the motel room TV caught my eye. They showed a picture of a woman's face, and my heart turned to ice. It was the investigator, Maria Flores. The news anchor's voice was serious as she read the report. Lead fraud investigator Maria Flores was found dead in her home earlier this evening. The cause appears to be a faulty gas line, and police currently suspect no foul play. The news anchor's voice faded, but her words hung in the cold motel room like a death sentence. Police suspect no foul play. My blood turned to ice. Maria Flores was dead. A gas leak. The cleanest, quietest, most untraceable kind of murder. The spark of hope I felt from remembering Silas's name was instantly extinguished by a tidal wave of fear. This was a message for Marcus, sent directly to us. This is what happens to people who cause him problems. We weren't just fighting for justice anymore. We were fighting to avoid ending up as a short, sad story on the evening news. A crushing wave of guilt washed over me. This was my fault. I sent the email. I brought the bulldog investigator to their door, and they put her down. She's dead because of me, Sarah. I choked out, the words tasting like ash. Sarah grabbed my shoulder, her grip surprisingly strong. No, she said, her voice firm. She is dead because of what they are. This is not on you, Caleb. This is on them. And now it's not just about revenge anymore. It's about stopping them before they do it to someone else. It's about stopping them before they do it to us. Her strength was an anchor in my storm of despair. But my mind couldn't reconcile the woman I knew with the monster she was with. I remembered a thunderstorm years ago that knocked our power out. Eleanor had been terrified of the dark, her hands trembling as she clung to my arm. I lit candles all over the house and held her until the storm passed, feeling like her protector. How could that woman, so afraid of a little thunder and lightning, now be partnered with a man who was the human embodiment of the storm itself? Then the awful truth hit me. She wasn't scared of the dark. She thrived in it. Our only path forward was the one lead I had, Silas Blackwood. Hiding was a death sentence. Our only chance was to attack. While I kept a nervous watch out the window, Sarah opened a new, clean laptop and went to work. She began digging into Blackwood Landscaping, the company owned by the thug with the serpent tattoo. On the surface, it looked perfectly normal, with a professional website showing photos of manicured lawns and beautiful gardens. The prettiest flowers can hide the most poisonous snakes, Sarah murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Every passing car in the motel parking lot made me jump. Every knock on a nearby door sent a jolt of panic through me. We were living on borrowed time. Marcus had my phone. He was actively hunting us. We were no longer ghosts pulling strings from the shadows. We were rats trapped in a box, and the owner of the box was kicking it, trying to crush us. How long would it be before he kicked our door in? The tiny motel room, which was supposed to be a safe place, began to feel more and more like a tomb. Sarah finally found something. He's dirty, Caleb, she said. Blackwood's company gets a lot of city contracts for parks and public works. But his bids are always way too high. Yet he wins them every time. Someone powerful is pulling strings for him, getting him these contracts and likely taking a piece of the profit. It was a classic case of corruption. But the next piece of information she found made my blood run cold. She had cross-referenced the business address with public property records. The large warehouse Silas operated from wasn't his. It was owned by a shell corporation. My breath caught in my throat. I knew what she was going to say before she said it. A shell corporation needs a director with a clean name, someone who looks respectable on paper, someone no one would ever suspect. Caleb, Sarah said softly, turning the laptop screen towards me. The registered owner and sole director of the corporation that owns that warehouse is Eleanor Vance. The name stared back at me from a screen. My wife. My quiet, book-loving Eleanor. She wasn't just in on the plan. She was the plan. It was all a lie. 30 years of marriage, a shared life, a home, all of it was a lie. Marcus wasn't the mastermind who seduced a lonely wife. He was the muscle, the enforcer. Eleanor was the quiet, hidden power behind it all. She was the one with the clean name, the good credit, the respectable face to hide a criminal enterprise behind. She didn't just betray me for another man. She betrayed me for a secret, dark life that I never even knew existed. She was the architect of my ruin. This changed everything. I thought I was fighting a greedy con man who had stolen my wife. But I was actually fighting my wife, who had been a stranger to me for our entire marriage. Which is worse? The monster you can see coming from a mile away, or the one who has been sleeping next to you every night for 30 years, smiling as you dreamed? The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, that I almost couldn't breathe. If Eleanor owns the building, Sarah said, pulling me back to the present, there must be official records. Permits, blueprints, inspection reports. My mind, the architect's mind, took over. A business like that a front for something illegal, I said, thinking out loud. It would have a hidden safe, a place to keep cash, documents, ledgers. Sarah was already typing again. I've got it, she said. The original building permits, from when it was constructed. She pulled up the scanned blueprints on the screen. Then her eyes went wide. Oh my God, she whispered, pointing to the bottom corner of the page. Caleb, look. The architect who designed the building and signed off on these plans, it was you. I stared at the screen, at the crisp, clean lines of a building I knew intimately, and at the looping, familiar signature in the corner that belonged to me. A wave of nausea washed over me. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing a stranger. I was not just a victim of Eleanor's lies. I was an unknowing accomplice. I had designed the very cage where she kept her secrets. I had personally built the foundation of my own ruin. Sarah looked at me, her expression unreadable. Caleb, she asked softly, do you remember this project? Slowly, like a rusty gear turning in my mind, the memory surfaced. It was about 10 years ago. Eleanor had come into my home office, smiling that sweet, gentle smile I had loved so much. She told me a dear friend from her book club was starting a small charity, shipping donated books and clothes to poor countries. They needed a simple, cheap warehouse design, and she had volunteered my services as a favor. I was swamped with work, but she was so proud, so persuasive. I dashed off the design in a single weekend, happy to help my wife with her noble cause. As the memory became clearer, another detail floated to the surface. There was one strange request for the design. Eleanor's friend needed a small, heavily reinforced, climate-controlled room built into the office area. It's for storing sensitive old documents and rare books, she had explained. They need to be protected from moisture. It seemed odd for a small charity, but I was too busy to question it. I designed a room, complete with a reinforced steel door and its own ventilation system. It wasn't a room for books. It was the safe. I had designed and built the vault for her. The horror of the realization was quickly replaced by a cold, sharp, and dangerous feeling. Hope. The biggest secret, the deepest betrayal, had just become our greatest weapon. I know this building, Sarah, I said, my voice low and trembling with a new energy. I know it better than they do. I know its secrets because I created them. The balance of power had just shifted. We were no longer just the hunted. We had been given a map that led directly to the heart of the monster's lair. Our new plan began to form, born out of desperation and this shocking new advantage. We had to get inside that warehouse. We had to get to that safe. If there was any proof that could link Eleanor and Marcus to their crimes, to Maria Flores's murder, it would be locked away in that room. But the warehouse wasn't just a building. It was the center of their entire criminal world. It would be guarded, and the men inside had already proven they were not afraid to kill. What kind of security were we about to walk into? For the next 48 hours, the motel room became our command center. Sarah, a master of the digital world, became our intelligence officer. She hacked into city planning databases, pulling up satellite photos of the warehouse. She tracked the delivery schedules of their known business partners. She even found a way to monitor the building's power usage, noticing a significant drop every night between 2 o'clock and 5 a.m. They run on a skeleton crew at night, she concluded. 2 guards, one in a security office watching cameras, and one walking the grounds. While Sarah mapped their movements, I studied my own blueprints. The plans I had drawn with such an innocent hand now looked like a treasure map, and I found our way in. A storm drain, an old concrete culvert, ran directly underneath the building's foundation. It was an old piece of city infrastructure I'd had to incorporate into the design. It led to a small maintenance closet in the back of the warehouse, just feet from the office with the safe. A forgotten corner. A blind spot. There was just one problem. The grate covering the drain inside the closet was bolted shut from the inside. We sat in the quiet of the motel room, the blueprints spread out between us like a declaration of war. The risk was immense. Silas and his men were not security guards. They were killers. If we were caught, we wouldn't be arrested. We would just be 2 more people who disappeared. A faulty gas leak. A tragic car accident. They had done it before. Doing nothing meant a lifetime of looking over our shoulders. But going in meant we might not have a lifetime to worry about. I looked at Sarah, at this incredible woman who had given up her safety, her job, her entire life, all for me. "Sarah, you don't have to do this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is my fight." She met my gaze, and her eyes were like steel. "They murdered a police officer, Caleb. They tried to murder you. They will do it again. This stopped being just your fight a long time ago." In that moment, we were more than just allies. We were a team forged in tragedy. Sarah closed her laptop and stood up. "The city's title charts say tonight is a full moon," she said, her voice steady. "The storm drain will be dry. It's our best and only chance." I looked down at my own signature on the blueprints one last time. The hand that had designed this prison would now be the one to tear it down. I stood up and nodded. "Let's go hunt some monsters," I said. Under the dim motel light, we began to pack a small bag with tools, our faces set, ready to walk into the darkness. The darkness inside the storm drain was absolute. It was cold and damp, and the air smelled of wet earth and decay. It felt like I was crawling back into my own grave. Every scrape of my knees on the rough concrete, every drip of water from the ceiling, echoed in the suffocating silence. Ahead of me, Sarah moved with a quiet focus, her small flashlight cutting a tiny beam through the blackness. We were 2 ghosts moving through the underbelly of the city, on our way to haunt the people who had tried to bury us. We reached the grate. It was heavy and rusted, the bolts tight with age. Every soft groan of the metal, as Sarah worked her wrench, sounded like a scream in the silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. After an eternity, the final bolt came loose. We pushed the heavy grate aside and climbed into a small, dark maintenance closet. We were inside. The warehouse was a vast cavern of shadows, filled with tall stacks of crates and the cold, sterile smell of cardboard and greed. We moved silently, following the map of the blueprints that was burned into my memory. We reached the office door. It was locked, as expected. Sarah knelt, pulling a small set of tools from her bag. The tiny clicks of the lockpicks were the only sound in the universe. Time seemed to stop. Then, with a final, soft snick, the door swung open. The office was modern and impersonal, with a large desk and a leather chair. And against the far wall, a monument to Eleanor's betrayal, was the thick, steel door of the safe. The electronic keypad on its face glowed with a faint green light. Our journey had ended at an impassable wall. I stared at the keypad, a wave of despair washing over me. All that risk, all that planning, and we were stopped by a simple password we could never guess. It was over. But as I looked closer, I saw the small logo of the security company on the keypad. It was the same system we had at our house for 15 years. A sudden, impossible thought struck me. Eleanor was a creature of habit, a woman who found comfort in routine. She had always used the same 6 numbers for everything important. A 6-digit number, she once told me, was her lucky combination. Our wedding anniversary. With a hand that trembled, I reached out and typed the numbers into the keypad. 0-8-1-4-9-2, August 14, 1992. The date I had promised to love and protect her forever. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a loud click echoed through the office, and the heavy door swung open. We stepped inside. The room was filled with boxes of financial ledgers and neat stacks of cash. Sarah immediately grabbed the ledgers, the proof we needed to burn their empire to the ground. But my eyes were drawn to a smaller, locked metal box on a shelf in the back. I forced the small box open with a crowbar. Inside, my blood ran cold. The first document was a signed statement from Eleanor, detailing Marcus's role in my accidental death. It was a piece of blackmail, a weapon to keep her enforcer on a leash. But beneath that was something far worse. It was a brand new life insurance policy, approved just last week. The insured person was Marcus Black. The sole beneficiary was Eleanor Vance. I wasn't the last victim. I was just the first. She was going to kill him, too. Marcus was just another loose, and she planned to tie up. It was all her. It had always been her. Marcus wasn't the puppeteer. He was just the scariest puppet. Eleanor, my quiet, gentle Eleanor, was the master of this entire dark world. My revenge was no longer about a cheating wife. It was about stopping a queen from sacrificing another pawn. I took all of the documents from the box, the evidence that would unravel everything. But I left one thing behind for her. I placed a small, silver locket from our honeymoon on the very center of the empty shelf. A final message from the ghost she created. We slipped back out through the drain, our bag now heavy with justice. We didn't go to the police. We were still ghosts. Instead, Sarah sent copies of everything to 3 places. An investigative journalist with a reputation for taking down criminals, the FBI, and an anonymous tip to a rival gang mentioned in the ledgers, telling them about a warehouse full of unprotected cash. We didn't just light a fuse. We detonated the bomb and started a war, ensuring Eleanor's world would be torn apart from every possible direction. Weeks later, I sat with Sarah in a small, sunny cafe 1,000 miles away. We watched a news report on her laptop. The camera showed Eleanor and Marcus being led away in handcuffs, their faces pale with shock and rage. Their empire had collapsed in a storm of police raids and gang violence. They were turning on each other, blaming each other, just as I knew they would. I was no longer Caleb Vance, the dead architect. I was just a man with a scarred face, sitting in the sun, finally at peace. Sarah, the woman who saved my life, sat across from me, and we smiled. We were free. My story started in darkness at the bottom of a cliff, but it doesn't end there. It ends here in the light. It's a story about how even when everything is taken from you, you can still fight back. You can find strength in the most unexpected places and in the most unexpected people. Thank you for being a part of my journey back to the light. If my story meant something to you, or if it could give hope to someone you know, please like and share this video. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, because every story of survival is a light that deserves to be seen.